All right, and welcome to this special episode of Real Estate Fight Club. This is a series called What Would You Do?, where we talk about professional standards and ethics committee cases and violations. And here with me today is Rachael Real from Rachael Real Real Estate. Hey, Rachael.
Good morning, Jen. How are you?
Good. I'm excited for our case today.
Yes, it's a little interesting. It kind of talks about negotiating commissions and when can it be done when you're talking about a transaction.
Okay.
So that's kind of what we're going to talk about today. So we're going to talk about this as it relates to Article 3. And Article 3 states, realtors shall cooperate with other brokers except when cooperation is not in the client's best interest. The obligation to cooperate does not include the obligation to share commissions, fees, or to otherwise compensate another broker. So think about the fact too that when we talk about this as it relates to Article 3, cooperation and compensation are two different things.
Yes.
So cooperation means that you're working with another agent. Compensation is obviously the monetary factor of that.
You don't have to cooperate and work with another agent if it's not in the client's best interest.
Correct.
Have you actually had a case about that?
I don't think we have yet. I don't think we have yet.
It's not in their best interest. I was like, that agent's a jerk. It is not.
Well, our case example will kind of explain that a little bit too. So we're going to talk about this as it relates to Standard of Practice 3-3, which says Standard of Practice 3-3 does not preclude the listing broker and cooperating broker from entering into an agreement to change the cooperative compensation. So the Code of Ethics says you have to cooperate. What's that?
It can't be part of the contract.
It's never part of the contract.
Right.
It's never part of that. It just says that the Code of Ethics is never going to get in the way of you negotiating or agreeing to change compensation between you and another broker. Okay. So here's our case study for today. So this says, Realtor A signs a listing agreement with seller B for the sale of her home. The home is priced at $1 million, and Realtor A files the listing with the MLS, offering a certain percentage of cooperative compensation. Realtor C sees the listing and knows it would be a perfect fit for her buyers, but unfortunately it's out of their price range. She discusses it with them and they ask her to submit an offer of $900,000. Realtor C explains the risks in submitting an offer so far below asking price, but the buyers are in love with the home and ask her to submit the offer anyway. Realtor C submits the offer to Realtor A, who discusses it with seller B. Seller B is concerned about accepting an offer so far below the home's asking price, so Realtor A offers to reduce her commission, as articulated in the listing agreement, by 1% if seller B wants to accept the offer of $900,000 and ensure a quick sale. So the listing agent and the seller are discussing, here's an offer. I know it's $100,000 less than you want, but if I reduce my commission by 1%, that will put more money in your pocket.
Your commission is not part of the buyer and seller negotiating with their buyers.
I would agree with you. That I 100% agree with that. So Realtor A informs Realtor C that their offer was accepted, but that Realtor A is now being paid 1% less in commission. I don't even know how I feel about that being part of that conversation, because I feel like that's a conversation between the listing agent and the seller, not the seller's agent and the seller, or and the buyer. So I'm not sure how I feel about that.
Okay.
So listen, she explains to Realtor C, it seems like both of our clients are happy with the price if it means the sale moves quickly. Can't argue with that. Would you be willing to split the difference on my reduced commission and I pay you 0.5% less in cooperative compensation than I specified in the MLS? So remember that the offer of compensation between cooperating brokers is done via the MLS.
Right.
So what you put in there is what that buyer's agent understands that they're working for when they show and potentially sell that property. Realtor C agrees to accept 0.5% less than the commission specified in the MLS. After closing, Realtor C files an ethics complaint against Realtor A, alleging a violation of Article 3 as illustrated by Standard Practice 3-2. What do you think?
Oh, okay, so I think, one, we agree that as an agent, you have a fee that you charge for the service, and the seller agrees to pay the fee or not. It is not
right. And they do that well before you start marketing the property, well before anything. It's just,
it is, yeah.
Here is my fee. It's not contingent upon all these other factors.
Right. And I think we did an actual real estate fight club episode on this in the beginning, but it is not, yeah, it's not negotiable later on. That's one.
Right.
Secondly,
I have seen instances where listing agents will say, here's my fee, it's X%. However, if we get it under contract in the first 2 weeks or 1 week or whatever it might be, some predetermined time frame, their compensation may drop a little bit.
And that's fine. Whatever you agree, whatever your fee is, that's fine. Do whatever you want.
Right.
It's done ahead of time, right? Like, this is what I'm going to do for you, seller, and here's the fee associated, however you want to do it. So, and then secondly, if you are an agent that has agreed that, hey, if we get a lower price and then I will reduce the commission by such and such, then that's on you. You should
yes, I agree.
Ask your colleague to take a reduction when you've already told them what they would be paid. It's ridiculous.
100%. Right. I agree.
Okay, so then the question is I don't really think that once that buyer agent agreed to take a reduction, they can't then come back and say, well, it's a violation. They should have just said no.
Absolutely. Now, you also cannot take compensation and make it part of a negotiation. So that's a little bit of that's another standard of practice. That's not part of this. They're not saying, hey, I'm going to write this offer, or we're under contract, I'm going to cancel this offer.
Right.
If you don't give me X. You can't extort people. Let's just be clear there. Just saying.
Why are we in real estate?
I don't know.
I never really thought about that, but yeah, that's what it is, right?
Oh, 100%.
God, this is so dramatic.
I know.
Should we take a break?
Let's take a break, and then we'll talk about the findings here.
Exactly. All right. So the two partners that I want to tell you about today, the first one is Cyberbacker. So Monica and I really love Cyberbacker. They help us with a lot of our social media posting, our newsletter, just different like tedious tasks, especially marketing. It really helps us out. So if you go to cyberbacker.com, you decide you want to be sign up with them, use code Fight Club. And then the other one is our coach, John Kitchens. So he's my coach, he's not Monica's. But I think everybody needs a coach so that it will help reveal your blind spots and why, if you're not where you want to be, it will help you get there faster. So if you go to coachcode.com and sign up, he's got a lot of classes and different things coming down the pipe. All right, Rachel.
Okay. So are we in agreement that the change in the compensation is between the listing brokerage and the seller? And really you shouldn't be looping another agent into your negotiations between you and your client. No, you gotta think about the fact that these are two different sets of people. So you've got a listing brokerage and a seller, and a buyer's broker and a buyer. Those two agreements are this. There's a line down the middle here. They don't need to cross, and they shouldn't.
They shouldn't cross, yeah. And I think okay, I have two schools of thought. Like, one, I think it's okay to ask. Maybe, I guess. I don't really think it is, but like, also, I don't know, I probably would ask too. But I also
think about this. If you were an employee of a regular, just some, any company, and you were agreeing to work for $15 an hour, and then when it came to payday, they asked you, hey, I know we said you'd work for $15 an hour, would you take 10?
Right.
My answer to that is no.
Yeah, so and that's the thing, like the buyer's agent has to say, no, when we saw it, I was under the impression that the fee to me would be this. So
absolutely, stand your ground a little bit and understand that if for some reason the MLS is offering a compensation to you that's less than what you would normally work for, then it's your responsibility to close the gap with your buyer.
Correct.
Via a buyer agency agreement.
Sorry, say that.
What? What?
Agreement. Oh my.
Right. I know. It's a crazy thought. It's a totally crazy thought.
Yeah, but I think like if I'm the buyer agent and the seller comes to me, the seller's agent comes to me asking me about this commission, in my head, I am thinking, well, if I say no, they're not going to take the client's offer. Is it worth it?
And that is a violation of the code of ethics.
Yeah, but how do you prove that?
I think there's ways to prove it via documentation, timing, phone records. I mean, there's all different kinds of ways you can build a timeline for these things. But, you know, I mean, I think in this particular situation too, they were still, I don't know if they had it in writing, and it doesn't say whether or not they had it in writing, but in a situation where this purchase contract is in writing, signed off by both parties, and now the agent is saying, hey, would you take less?
No.
Well, the answer is hell no, because now you've got a written contract here that says, no, this is what's going on. Now, again, I think if you are a buyer's agent, and you say, well, we're going to cancel this contract unless you offer us this, I think we have a bigger problem.
Or a seller's agent that says that, either side.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. If you can't agree to this, then we're going to cancel.
I think the listing agent, if they are renegotiating, they can always speak for themselves, their broker, and themselves.
Right.
And I don't think that they should just, yeah, I don't know, I agree.
Well, like you said, that's on you. If you want to agree to take a lower percentage, you have to be able and be willing to eat that if the other agent says no. And the other agent has every right to say no.
Yeah, but the question is like, should you even ask?
My opinion, no. It's in black and white. It's not like you're trying to negotiate something here that we don't know what the answer is.
Right, exactly.
So,
all right, so, but I don't think that I don't think that agent was in violation, because I don't know, I just think that the buyer agent said yes, and so they agreed and it was done.
They agreed and it was done, right.
If they would have said no and then it didn't get done, then yeah, I think they would be in violation. I don't know.
Exactly. No, I think that's a fair way to assess it. So at the hearing on the matter, Realtor C argued that by asking her to accept 0.5% less in cooperative compensation after the offer was submitted, so there's the thing, after it was already submitted, Realtor A was unilaterally modifying the compensation with regard to that transaction. The hearing panel disagreed and found no violation of Article 3, noting that Standard of Practice 3-3 specifically authorizes listing and cooperating brokers to enter into an agreement to change the compensation for a transaction at any time, and that the Code of Ethics would never interfere with the negotiation of commissions between listing and cooperating brokers. The panel also noted that Realtor C could have said no to the reduced commission,
right,
and in that instance, Realtor A would have been obligated to pay the commission stated in the MLS.
It's kind of a hard thing though, because I do imagine that they would feel like, well, if I say no, then this deal's not going to happen to the client.
Right. And I think if we went down that path and you kind of took it step by step, and if that happened, I have to think two brokers, designated managing brokers, would be getting involved and having a conversation that, hey, this you can't do this, and if you do this, you're going to find yourself in a big pickle.
Except that you're right, sure. I mean, right, that could happen, or
right,
it could just, your client then doesn't have a house. You know what I mean? I don't know. I mean, people get real picky about. They get real petty about things.
Yes, they do. And in that situation too, as that agent who may be being asked to take less money than they normally would have, and feeling like that may happen, I would agree that I would probably stick it out and then address it at the end of the transaction.
Right, exactly.
And try and recoup that from the other brokerage, or
yeah,
I'm not really sure. Yeah, I mean, I think
I
would never do anything to jeopardize my client's ability to get a house that they wanted.
I know, that's the thing, and it has happened where, like, I've been called and said, hey, they have a hard net that they need to get because of what they owe on the property.
Right.
But I've seen it with times where the agents have reduced their compensation, but the seller still gets a lot of money. And that's where the hard rub is, where I'm like, well, why did you reduce I can see it if it's like the number is 0. Like, no, they're not making anything because of and their situation, all this stuff.
Right, like a short sale situation, or an estate or something, right? Where there is no equity to be made at the closing of a property.
Right, but when there's a large amount of equity and the seller is just beating up the listing agent, and so then in turn, the listing agent is asking for financial participation from the buyer's agent, it's like, no. Why? What is the point? No. Why am I just giving them money? They have already agreed to allow you to market the property for X amount, and you have to charge. Then you told me what my fee was going to be. I agreed to the fee. Why would I go for less?
I always laugh at as we kind of talked about earlier, when you have a listing agreement between a seller and a listing agent, and there's that verbiage in it that says if it sells within, the first 2 weeks or a month or whatever, we'll reduce the fee. Well, isn't the whole point of selling it to be, it seems like it would be bass backwards, right?
Or if it sells, but then some of the times the sellers are like, well, if it sells fast and you want to price it, and you're like, oh my God, I don't even want to.
Right. I feel like it's it gets funny, but your whole job as a listing agent is to market the property and sell it within the shortest amount of time, the least amount of stress to the seller, and at the most money to the seller.
Well,
that is your job. So if you're taking a pay cut for doing your job really well,
which makes no sense. But sometimes sellers, they don't want to sell it. They don't want to sell it right away. It creates an issue for them, right? And so that's the conversation is, okay, well, we either need to delay based on market. We need to make sure that we ask for a post-closing occupancy or delayed closing, or there's options, right? But
there are some options, right? And the private network is kind of where that's the only benefit I really see to the private network, is for someone to be able to maximize or capture, some kind of quirky thing that they might need, a long timeline, a rent back, a closing. We're in the middle of winter here. If I would like a spring closing, then let's put it on the private network, where maybe somebody else who's looking for a spring closing might be completely okay with that. I don't want to eat up market time, for something like that when it doesn't make any sense. That's the only positive I see to the private network. I see a lot of problems with it, but that's one of my only positives to it.
That's good. I'm glad you can see that. You're such a ray of sunshine, Rachel.
Aren't I? Right.
Well, if people have a referral for you in Chicago, or they have a question, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
Best way to reach me is by cell phone at 630-542-8688. You can shoot me a text there anytime, or via email at rreal@dealwithreal.com.
Awesome. Thanks for being on, Rachel. I'll see you.
Well, thanks, Jen. Yeah.
If people want to see this case, they can go to jennifermartlin.com/vault, and there's a folder for What Would You Do, and you can see the written out case. All right. Thanks, Rachel.
No problem. See you, Jen.